Joe Biden's presidential term begins. With the inauguration out of the way, the new leader of the United States gets to work repairing the rift separating the country.
We must end this uncivil war.
Australia's COVID plan, its vaccine rollout, how doctors, nurses and pharmacists are preparing to protect the country from the virus. The Australia Day debate, Scott Morrison and Cricket Australia clash over appropriate reference to the day. And at least 4 people killed in Madrid after an explosion rips through a building.
This is SBS World News with Janice Peterson.
Good evening. US President Joe Biden has begun his White House administration with a blizzard of executive orders in a bid to undo his predecessor's legacy. Donald Trump snubbed the inauguration, a sharp break with tradition. Amid unprecedented security, President Biden pleaded for unity as he takes the helm of a country facing multiple crises. With the United States still shaken by the assault on Congress, the nation's oldest Commander-in-Chief promised to be a president for all Americans.
A final flight of stairs to climb on a cold January morn. The west front of the capital, so recently besieged, transformed. 3 former presidents and their spouses, the Clintons, Bushes and Obamas, had come to witness Joe Biden assume power. Vice President Mike Pence applauded on arrival, his presence serving to highlight the absence of another. As Joe Biden stepped up to take his oath, his wife Jill holding a 128-year-old family Bible.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute.
At age 78, becoming America's 46th president.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
A kiss for America's new First Lady. And then, before supporters and predecessors, his vision.
This is America's day. This is democracy's day. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause.
Addressing obliquely the turmoil since Election Day.
Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
Listening, America's new Vice President. She'd also just been sworn in.
Please raise your right hand.
Kamala Harris beaming as she became the highest-ranking woman to hold office in the United States and the first black American and first person of South Asian descent to be Vice President. Hugging her husband, Doug Emhoff, America's first second gentleman. Pop star Lady Gaga had wowed with fashion and the national anthem.
That our flag was still there.
But the sea of flags on the mall, a stand-in for thousands unable to attend because of the pandemic. Troops in Washington omnipresent, just 14 days after a mob marauded through Congress. The new president appealing for a new understanding.
This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge. And unity is the path forward. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue.
But even as the Harrises bid a jovial farewell to the Pences, it was Mike Pence who rejected Donald Trump's bid to overturn the election. President Biden reaching his new address surrounded by security, not crowds. Embracing his wife and the moment before finally entering the White House. Signing a stack of executive orders to begin the repudiation and rollback of the Trump era. And swearing in nearly 1,000 federal appointees, remotely with a warning.
I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot.
And the new White House press secretary insisting the Biden administration will be fundamentally different.
His objective and his commitment is to bring transparency and truth back to government.
President Biden attending a wreath-laying ceremony at the tomb of the unknown soldier with the 3 former presidents. Solemnity and then celebration. President Biden watching from the White House balcony, the responsibility now his to reunite the nation. Pruluan, SBS World News.
And Joe Biden's first day on the job has been a busy one. So what's next for the 46th President of the United States? Well, SBS reporter Prue Luan will be back. She'll join me for a look at President Biden's top priority a little later in the show. While the afternoon and the evening belonged to President Joe Biden, the morning was given over to his predecessor's departure. Now former President Donald Trump skipped the inauguration in favour of his own farewell party. He's already been impeached and is facing conviction for allegedly inciting an insurrection on the US Capitol 2 weeks ago. Today, though, he left office without incident.
He did his utmost to avoid this moment, but with legal avenues exhausted and his successor hours from taking the oath, Donald John Trump departed the White House and the presidency.
A great honor, the honor of a lifetime.
His final words unexpectedly conciliatory. And with that, the Trumps boarded Marine One, staff carrying their final few boxes before flying away from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Traditionally, outgoing presidents and first ladies would host their successors at the White House before attending the inauguration. But breaking 150 years of tradition, Mr. and Mrs. Trump did neither. Instead hosting a farewell for themselves at the Joint Andrews Air Base in Maryland, the home of Air Force One.
I wish the new administration great luck and great success. I think they'll have great success. They have the foundation to do something really spectacular.
Talking up his legacy,
we've gotten so much done that nobody thought would be possible.
Before insisting his influence isn't at an end.
I will always fight for you. I will be watching. I will be listening. We love you. We will be back in some form.
The invite list was extensive, even including some disgruntled former members of Team Trump, like one-time communications director Anthony Scaramucci. But the turnout ultimately consisted of just friends and family. Daughter Ivanka caught on camera holding back tears before shifting behind husband Jared and their son. Tiffany Trump also overcome with emotion. Eric Trump and Don Jr. with their partners giving little away, as the Trump dynasty begins yet another chapter.
I did it my way.
But before signing off as the 45th President of the United States, the unconventional leader did follow one convention, leaving a letter for Joe Biden in the Oval Office.
The President wrote a very generous letter. It's because it was private. I will not talk about it until I talk to him, but it was generous.
Mr. and Mrs. Trump landing in Florida for their first night in 4 years as private citizens. The President posing for the photographers as his wife walked on. What's next for Donald Trump is unclear. An impeachment trial in the Senate looms that could derail a potential run for the presidency in 2024. For now, while his Florida faithful celebrates his indefinite return, the only real certainty for the former reality TV star turned commander-in-chief, a few rounds of golf at his Mar-a-Lago resort, his new home. Omer Dehen, SBS World News.
And for a wrap of this momentous day, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by CNN reporter Whitney Wild. Good evening, Whitney. This, of course, was a very different inauguration compared to what we're used to. What was the experience like being there?
Well, it was a little bit muted. Normally, the inauguration is full of crowds. It's loud. Us broadcasters are outside from before dawn all the way up through the end of the ceremony. But it wasn't like that this time. There were no crowds. However, it was not short on celebration. There was a virtual inaugural ball that featured people from all across the country. So there were moments of celebration, and it was capped off by a very large fireworks show just over my shoulder, just over the White House, between the White House and the Washington Monument. Janice.
Whitney, no hint of trouble. Do you think that was because security was so tight, or has the US now turned a corner following last fortnight's insurrection?
You know, I hope that, I think a lot of Americans hope that it is the latter, but it's hard to say at this point. The security posture in the city is so tight, it's difficult to know if there is still some, if there will eventually be some bubbling up of some of the same emotions and some of the same actions that we saw on January 6th, although I can assure you they are doing everything they can to make sure something like that never happens again at the Capitol. Even Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying that the security posture at the Capitol will never be the same. However, you know, the reason that it was so quiet today, it's really hard to say. And at this point, only time will tell, Janice.
Thank you so much. That's CNN reporter Whitney Wild reporting live from Washington, D.C. Well, around the world, leaders have congratulated Joe Biden on the start of his term, some doing little to hide their delight at the change in leadership. Old allies expressed enthusiasm at strengthening old bonds, while other nations struck a more conciliatory tone to mark President Biden's inauguration.
From his meetings with Kim Jong-un,
We fell in love.
to his Helsinki one-on-one with Vladimir Putin.
He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
And his very public disagreements with America's allies. Donald Trump tore up the rule book of global diplomacy, but the America First era is over and the world is moving on.
It's a fantastic thing for America. It's a step forward for the country that's been through a bumpy period.
President Trump was always fond of Boris Johnson.
They're saying Britain Trump. They call him Britain Trump.
But the British Prime Minister denies he'll struggle to bond with his new counterpart.
Actually, when you look at the issues that unite me and Joe Biden, the UK and the United States right now, there's a fantastic joint common agenda.
Unlike Donald Trump, Joe Biden was not a fan of Brexit, and a free trade deal between the US and the UK is unlikely to be at the top of his to-do list. There is real concern here that the new administration's focus will be on developing stronger relationships with Paris, Berlin and Brussels, rather than London. Some European leaders not hiding their delight at the change of management in Washington.
Once again, after 4 long years, Europe has a friend in the White House.
The EU will support President Biden's efforts to re-enter the 2015 Iran nuclear pact, which President Trump quit in 2018. The Iranian president gloating about Trump's political demise.
برای دنیا و برای ملت ما بیشتر روشن شد که سیاست فشار حداکثری و تروریسم اقتصادی نسبت به ایران 100% شکست خورده.
Israel's leader Benjamin Netanyahu loathed the Iranian deal and was a strong supporter of the Trump administration's hardline stance against Tehran. He could find himself at odds with the Biden State Department, but for now, kind words.
I look forward to working with you to further strengthen the US-Israel alliance.
The Chinese government marking the occasion by announcing sanctions against 28 Trump-era US officials, including former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who angered Beijing with his last day in the job accusation that China has committed genocide against Uyghur Muslims. India is celebrating the inauguration of Kamala Harris as Vice President. Residents of her maternal grandfather's village holding prayers for her success. While in the Biden family's ancestral home in Ireland, nearly everyone claims to be a cousin of the new president.
This is a great day for Biden and for our family.
Despite Biden's great-great-great-grandfather leaving for America 160 years ago, he often speaks with pride about his Irish heritage. In London, Ben Lewis, SBS World News.
Well, Australia's leaders have also congratulated President Biden and Vice President Harris on their inauguration. While leaders have pledged to strengthen ties, Australia is also being warned it will need to do more on climate change or face pressure from the new administration.
The dawn of a new era in the United States and the return of a more conventional president to the world stage. Messages of congratulations from wartime allies.
Australia and the United States are the best of mates and the best of allies, regardless of who's in the White House or whoever's in the lodge.
Scott Morrison has already invited President Biden down under this year to mark the 70th anniversary of the ANZUS Treaty. A phone call between the two leaders is yet to be confirmed, though it is front of mind.
I will note for you that I would expect his early calls will be with partners and allies. He feels it's important to rebuild those relationships and to address the challenges and threats we're facing in the world.
I appreciate the sort of very warm sentiment that we're already getting back from the Biden administration.
Labor too congratulating the new administration, but accusing Mr Morrison of damaging the relationship by pandering too much to former President Trump and failing to strengthen ties with senior Democrats.
Well, it is unfortunate that Scott Morrison didn't look after the relationship appropriately.
While both nations laud the strength of the alliance, President Biden has vowed to lobby countries to set more ambitious climate targets and he's promised to confront leaders who won't. In one of his first acts in the Oval Office,
we're going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord.
Experts say it's a symbolic shift.
Resuming that will put pressure on members who are seen not to be pulling their weight. And Australia has come under a lot of international criticism for its inaction on climate change.
Biden would be pushing America's friends like Australia to do more on climate change. So we don't want to look like a recalcitrant.
Like a commitment to net zero emissions by 2050, the Prime Minister has so far refused, instead saying it's achievable.
Net zero carbon economy here in Australia. Yeah, we want to achieve that, and we're working hard to work out when that can be achieved by.
The pressure to achieve that now likely to increase. Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
Coming up next, the UK records its highest death toll from COVID-19 for the second day in a row. Also, how the Australian government plans to roll out vaccines across the country. And an uncertain future for more than 100 detainees as more asylum seekers are freed from months locked in a hotel.
Tonight at 7:30, the world's greatest palaces, and later witness the storm that started an avalanche of war in The Rise of the Nazis, and then a new episode of World on Fire.
Hang on, so this is him, my great-great-great-grandfather.
It's so funny to feel this connection to somebody that you don't know.
I didn't know that this was going to mean so much to me.
I would like to establish that there is no biological link this way.
I knew it!
Whoa.
Has my whole life been a lie, basically?
You look more like him than I do.
I definitely got her legs. Thanks a lot, Hope.
The brand new season, Who Do You Think You Are UK, starts tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
A cinematic journey of isolation, survival and healing. The Beach, Tuesday, Jan 26, 8:30 on SBS, NITV and on demand.
Harvey Norman, your destination for the new Samsung Galaxy S21 series. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S21 128GB for $0 up front when you sign up to a new Optus $85 per month SIM-only plan for 24 months. That's right, sign up to an Optus $85 per month SIM-only plan for 24 months and pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy S21 128GB for $0 up front. Plus, get bonus Galaxy Buds Live. Pre-order bonus offer ends 28th of January at Harvey Norman.
Ferrari formal wear and bridal mega sale is on now. Get up to 70% off. Bridal gowns start from $199. Men's designer suits from only $99. Don't miss the mega sale. 1 week only. Visit ferrariformal.com.au.
Since we took over the farm, we've had 3 best in shows. 5 utes, 15 farmhands, 2 snakes in the house, hundreds of chooks, 2 bushfires, 2 pairs of boots, too many droughts, but only 1 insurance agent.
Customers stick with Elders Insurance because, as locals ourselves, we know your business and understand your individual needs. Elders Insurance, our way never gets old.
Is dandruff holding you back? Try Head & Shoulders Ultra Men 2-in-1 Deep Clean from Chemist Warehouse for a deep cleanse and up to 100% dandruff protection. Head & Shoulders Deep Clean is $11.99. Live, look, feel well at Chemist Warehouse.
The streets of New York, where the American dream can turn into a gangster nightmare.
Man I work for, he didn't own his own company. White man owned it, so they owned him. Nobody owns me, though.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
Bribery, extortion, murder.
Gangster movie season continues with American Gangster, Saturday 8:30 on SBS.
SBS World Movies concludes a month-long celebration of cinema with 5 massive Oscar-winning films.
Once-in-a-lifetime deal. I'm a Abigail. Yes!
I fell in love with the name Jasmine.
I'm from a different time. Good morning, Theodore.
Oscars season continues with Blue Jasmine tonight 9:30 on SBS World Movies and on demand.
Today marks 1 year to the day since the US confirmed its first case of coronavirus. Since then, nearly 24.5 million Americans have contracted the virus and more than 406,000 have died. Joe Biden promising to make the fight against the pandemic a top priority.
On a day characterised by hope, despair too, at a soaring death toll that shows no sign of easing.
Join me in a moment of silent prayer.
President Joe Biden making his first executive order, one requiring masks and social distancing in all federal buildings. He's promised to vaccinate 100 million people in his first 100 days, but shortages loom. New York's governor says the state will run out of vaccines within 2 or 3 days. They're worried too in New Jersey.
Give us the vaccine and we'll finish the job.
1, 2, 3, go.
Across the Atlantic, another grim record for the second day in a row. The UK registering 1,820 deaths, taking the national toll to more than 93,000, the 5th highest in the world.
This time it's been a perfect storm, really, of the new variants arrived, we've hit winter at just the wrong time, Christmas has arrived at exactly the worst time it could have done, and there's just been a steady, inexorable rise of cases.
The Prime Minister described the latest figures as appalling.
There will be more to come, because what we're seeing is the result of the wave of the new variants.
The surge in deaths comes amid mixed news on the vaccine front. While researchers found the Pfizer vaccine is likely to protect against the so-called UK variant, separate research found it might be less effective against one emerging in South Africa. The team behind the Oxford vaccine now reported to be working on new versions to cope with the different variants. But any vaccine will come too late for many in Brazil. In Amazonas state, dozens have died in the past week because of a lack of oxygen. Help came overnight on board 5 trucks from Venezuela, which travelled more than 1,500 kilometres to the city of Manaus. Brazil has been criticised for the slow rollout of its vaccination programme. But there was some good news. This 106-year-old Brazilian woman survived the Spanish flu that killed millions. Yesterday she was one of the first to roll up her sleeve. Nick Wells, SBS World News.
In Australia, the government says it's secured enough doses of the COVID-19 vaccine to use on the adult population 3 times over. Health Minister Greg Hunt confirming today that the country has access to around 140 million doses to protect a population of around 25 million. And while the vaccines haven't yet arrived, a decision on approving them for use in Australia is now imminent.
A glimpse at how our healthcare system will roll out the COVID-19 vaccine.
We'll have a vaccination room up and running in the next couple of days, and the COVID-19 vaccine is another area that we want to step up and help the Australian public.
A group boosted by the federal government who'll be trained and tasked with the vaccine rollout. This doctor, one of thousands across the country, preparing for the packages to arrive.
As a GP, I'm really excited to be able to put all the thinking that has been happening over the last 12 months actually into an implementation plan to be able to vaccinate the members of my community.
The Therapeutic Goods Administration is now in the final stages of regulatory checks for the AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines. Once they arrive, 4 million Australians are set to receive the jab by the end of March. First on the list, priority groups like quarantine and healthcare workers. Extra staff will also be deployed to aged care facilities and remote Indigenous communities. It comes as Australia today recorded its 4th consecutive day of no locally acquired cases. But the country is still cautious, the government announcing new requirements for returned travellers to come into effect tomorrow.
PCR tests will be required within the 72 hours prior to departure for international travellers, that masks will be required on international flights.
The mask mandate in Queensland, though, to be lifted tomorrow, 2 weeks after the city endured a 3-day lockdown.
50 people will be allowed to come into your own home, 100 people in public spaces. We go back to that 1 per 2 square metre rule in our pubs and cafes.
Caps on private gatherings have also increased in South Australia as Victoria plans to lift limits on overseas arrivals. Tasmania has also dropped border rules with Greater Brisbane and much of Sydney. The vaccine rollout now the ticket to a rollback of even more restrictions. Danielle Robertson, SBS World News.
Men's tennis world number 1 Novak Djokovic has moved to clarify his widely criticised list of demands made on behalf of tennis players serving quarantine in Melbourne ahead of the Australian Open. Djokovic wrote in an open letter that his good intentions were misconstrued as selfish and that he was merely looking out for other players who aren't receiving the same privileges as him. The 8-time Melbourne Park champion is serving his own quarantine period in Adelaide, but he did manage to interact with fans today. Djokovic's wish list reportedly included reduced isolation periods and for players to be shifted to private residences with tennis courts. At least 4 people have been killed in Madrid and 11 injured after a large explosion caused a building to partially collapse. City officials believe the blast was caused by a gas leak.
Emergency services rushed to the scene of the blast near the city centre, with smoke and flames billowing out of the partly collapsed building. Locals wandering the streets littered with debris in shock.
Y de golpe, una explosión brutal a mi espalda, me ha dado como así como un empujón, no sabía de dónde venía, me pitaban las orejas y de golpe me he dado la vuelta y he visto ya en llamas el edificio, bueno, en llamas, perdona, se salía muchísimo humo.
Authorities warning people to clear the area, some worried about children at a nearby school.
Han sido como 10 minutos de muchísima angustia, porque yo vivo en ese edificio de ahí, desde aquí se ve mi casa. He sentido y escuchado perfectamente la explosión, pero no sabía de dónde venía.
The building's top 5 floors destroyed, with walls completely blown out. While it's unclear exactly how the blast was triggered, an electrician was working on a boiler beforehand.
También se ha avanzado, desde luego, en la hipótesis más probable de que lo que se haya producido es un escape de gas. Había un operario, además, se ha comprobado también, trabajando junto a la caldera. En estos momentos se está esperando a que se apague.
One body was later discovered under the rubble. Other casualties, an 85-year-old woman passing by and the electrician, with nearly a dozen wounded and several others hospitalised. The building's upper floors were being used to house training priests.
En estos momentos lo que importa, como ven, es la gente que haya podido o que esté todavía dentro, que no sabemos en total que no, y la gente pues que ha sido afectada y que ha sido ingresada.
Rescue workers and residents managed to evacuate elderly people located next door at a care home. No one there was hurt. Christine Carney, SBS World News.
Twitter has locked the account of China's US embassy for a tweet that defended China's policies towards Muslim Uyghur women in the Xinjiang region. The Chinese embassy account posted a tweet earlier this month that said that Uyghur women were no longer baby-making machines, a breach of Twitter's policy against dehumanisation. The Trump administration had, in its final hours, accused China of committing genocide in Xinjiang, a finding endorsed by the incoming Biden administration. Nearly all the detained men at a Melbourne hotel after they were transferred there from offshore detention have now been released. The Home Affairs Minister suggesting today it's a cost-saving measure, but the future remains uncertain for more than 100 other detainees.
After years in detention, freedom within reach. Some 20 men were escorted from Melbourne's Park Hotel this morning to be released into the community, joining 26 others freed yesterday. One tweeting, "This is the most beautiful moment of my life. After 2,737 days locked up in detention, I am free." A young family was among thrilled supporters.
My kids call with them a lot and we video call, and now we finally get to give them a real hug, a real life hug, so it's very exciting.
Around 90 remain in detention at Kangaroo Point in Brisbane, more than a dozen still in Melbourne, including a 25-year-old who spent a third of his life in detention.
It's too much difficult to sleep, everything for me, very hard situation for me.
In 2013, Betelem was on board the same boat trying to get to Australia as one of those still detained.
Imagine we came on the same boat, we was sitting next to each other, and then now he's inside of this hotel. It makes me sad.
The men have been granted bridging visas to stay temporarily in Australia while they make arrangements to either resettle in the United States, return to Nauru or Papua New Guinea or their home country. The federal government saying
it's cheaper for people to be in the community than it is to be at a hotel or for us to be paying for them to be in detention.
We understand the men will be provided with 2 to 3 weeks accommodation and a small amount of money. They'll have access to Medicare and the right to work, but advocates say they are vulnerable.
You can't walk out the door from 7 years of incarceration and torture and find a job in 10 minutes.
The reality is that it falls on the community to actually support these people that are seeking asylum.
The magnitude of this moment, though, not lost.
I think it is as significant as the end to children in detention.
Philippa Carisbrook, SBS World News.
Australia has faced international pressure at a UN meeting on human rights to raise the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. More than 30 countries criticised the Australian government for its high incarceration rates of Indigenous children. Many others also voicing concerns over border policies, including offshore processing.
Australia's youth detention rates now a searing stain on its human rights record. Around 600 children under the age of 14 are locked up every year. Of those aged between 10 and 13, a staggering 78% are Indigenous Australians.
Well, we have not come a long way, and I think, the UN member countries repeatedly raised concerns about the severe inequality and the failure to meet the Closing the Gap targets.
During a UN review on human rights held in Geneva via video link, 31 member nations, including Canada, Sweden and Mexico, criticised Australia's high incarceration rates of children and also recommended that the government
raise the age of criminal responsibility.
And what's more worrying is to allow it to continue and the acceptance of this, where kids as young as 10 years old are being thrown in jail.
After receiving questions in advance, Australia's delegate admitted more work needs to be done.
Challenges remain in relation to improving the lives of Indigenous Australians and reducing their overrepresentation in the criminal justice system. Acknowledging this, the Australian Government has commenced a formal partnership with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as part of the National Agreement on Closing the Gap.
We didn't really quite see a really strong response.
Australia's Attorneys General launched a working group in 2018 but deferred a decision last year because they wanted more details on providing adequate support for offending children and their families. The ACT and the Northern Territory have since signalled their intention to raise the age of criminal responsibility.
It would be a real slap in the face if, the government simply ignores those recommendations or rejects them outright. So I think the government should really seize on this as an opportunity.
Several countries also used their 55-second speeches to criticise Australia's border policies, including its processing of asylum seekers offshore and refusing to settle people who arrive by boat. Virginia Langeberg, SBS World News.
The Prime Minister has slammed Cricket Australia over its decision to drop any reference to Australia Day from promotions for Big Bash matches on January 26. Cricket Australia made the call to promote inclusivity following consultation with Indigenous leaders. Promotional material will refer to January 26 rather than Australia Day. Scott Morrison hitting out at the sports governing body in an interview with a Queensland radio program.
I think a bit more focus on cricket and a little less focus on politics would be my message to Cricket Australia. I think that's pretty ordinary, but I mean, that's what they're putting on their press releases. That would be my view.
A Cricket Australia spokesperson responded to Mr Morrison's comments, saying the decision was about cricket, not tokenism. The Catholic Church has made what's believed to be a record compensation payout to a former altar boy who was abused by his priest in Perth more than 40 years ago. The 52-year-old victim gave harrowing testimony about the 3-year period of abuse that began when he was 10 years old. Western Australia's Supreme Court ordered a $2.45 million payout, which lawyers believe is up to $1 million higher than any previously awarded. They had alleged that Father Bert Adderley abused multiple boys before his death in 1983. He was never charged. Australians are waiting on at least $4 billion in refunds from cancelled travel due to COVID-19. The delay has left many Australians stranded overseas and unable to afford a new flight home.
Sumit Mohan hasn't seen his wife and children for 3 months. The Australian citizens are stuck in India, and he can't afford to sink $25,000 into return flights with such a high risk of cancellation.
It's a big money for someone who's able to save a couple of $1,000s every month. That means you're wiping 2 years of your savings just on flights, and that too you don't know whether they will be able to board the flight.
Cancelled departures are a common occurrence for Australians stranded overseas. Lucy Ganil has been bumped from 3 flights. The first was in September, and she's yet to receive a refund.
Minimum flight cost at the moment is about £8,000, and I just don't have that. I just don't. So at the moment, it's kind of that waiting game to get some money back so that I can then subsequently book a flight.
The Australian Federation of Travel Agents says $10 billion worth of travel booked by Australians through travel agents was cancelled when the borders were closed in March last year. 10 months later, only $6 billion of that amount has been returned, meaning there's at least $4 billion owed to Australians in unpaid refunds.
It's very complex and difficult. It could be huge global companies, or they might be really small individual family-owned hotels in different parts of the world. So we have to contract by contract unwind those. And if you visit a travel agent around Australia, there are piles of white folders.
Consumer Group Choice says persistence is key when asking for a refund.
If you're really persisting for a long time, several months, and you're not getting anywhere, try their social media accounts, as you'll often get a result on those accounts.
For now, Lucy and Sumit are waiting and hoping they'll be offered a Department of Foreign Affairs repatriation flight. But there's no way of knowing if their offer will come through next week, next month or ever. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
Well, Australia's labour market is recovering a lot faster than expected. SBS Finance Editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins us now with more. And Ricardo, the unemployment rate has fallen once again.
Janice, 8 in 9 jobs that were lost because of the pandemic-induced recession have now been recovered. It's a stunning comeback, with the Bureau of Statistics saying the December unemployment rate fell to 6.6%. It was 7.5% in July 2020. 50,000 jobs were created last month, with most of them full-time. We're also working more hours, although it's still down 1.5% over the year. And as people come off JobKeeper and gain more confidence in the economy, more people are in the workforce or actively looking for work, reflected in that record high participation rate.
There are still Australians who are doing it tough, and that is why the government will continue to put in place policies to support businesses.
When JobKeeper ends, too many local workers will lose their jobs, and so we need to avoid that.
Still, around 912,000 Australians were jobless in December, and there's a lot of spare capacity in the market.
JobKeeper and the Job Seeker and all the stimulus that's been provided has provided a lot of forbearance for the economy. There's still quite a lot of the adjustment of the economy to the post-pandemic new normal, the new normal of borders that are closed, a tourism industry that's struggling, international student numbers that are weak and so on. A lot of that adjustment still has to happen yet.
And youth unemployment is almost more than double the headline rate at 13.9%. The currencies market took the numbers to mean a strengthening economy, pushing the Aussie higher against the US. It is mixed across the other major global currencies. The US share market rallied on the first day of Joe Biden's presidency, with both the S&P 500 and the technology-based NASDAQ hitting record highs. Sectors leveraged to any economic recovery doing well.
The market's really started to price in the likelihood of more stimulus coming in the near term.
Technology shares were a big winner overnight, especially Netflix, which surged to a record high in the US. The pandemic and stay-at-home orders clearly benefiting the streaming service, which gained a record 37 million subscribers in 2020 for a total of just over 200 million. And that optimism flowed through to our share market, which hit an 11-month high. It was also supported by those better-than-expected jobs numbers. It means the 200 is now only 4.7% away from that February record high.
And we're heading into reporting season, and so far we've gone through a sort of a mini confession season, I guess, with many companies updating the market before reporting season, and they generally have been quite positive.
And Zip was one of them, reporting total customer numbers almost doubled year on year to 5.7 million, shares surging 23%. NAB was the best of the banks. Broker upgrades for BHP helped its share price, although Cleanaway declined after its CEO said he would resign. So all up, the Australian share market rose 0.8% today. And how much did we all spend over Christmas? Well, Janice will get some retail sales numbers for December tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Well, coming up next, how Donald Trump supporters are reacting to Joe Biden's inauguration and the warning to Australian men this summer.
Tonight at 7:30, the world's greatest palaces, and later witness the storm that started an avalanche of war in The Rise of the Nazis, and then a new episode of World on Fire.
This January,
I'll be the last one standing.
Heroes rise and legends fall in Vikings. A team of undercover cops take on the world's most dangerous terrorist in La Unidad.
I'll be the last one standing.
And a maverick detective teams up with a medical student to catch a killer in Vienna Blood.
We are witnessing the birth of a whole new science.
That's January on SBS On Demand.
Join NITV for 24 hours of reflection and healing. Immerse yourself in country and rise to a new dawn. Always was, always will be. 25th to 26th of January on NITV and On Demand.
When you're watching your gauges?
No, I was watching the road. It's never overheated before.
Well, it has now. Blown heater hose. It's pretty common. You need a full motor rebuild.
How much?
About $8 grand. If only it had an engine guard.
Engine guard?
It's an overheating alarm. Display on the dash, sensor on the motor, buzzer if she's getting hot.
How much?
About 100.
You got one?
Wouldn't travel without it.
Make more of the things you want possible with Cash Converters. Life made possible.
The Pope Auto Wind hose reel has an industry-leading rewind system, a stop-and-go action, a 180-degree swivel, and a 10-year hose warranty. So no more messy backyards. Pope. Smoother, safer, better.
Is dandruff holding you back? Try Head & Shoulders Ultra Men 2-in-1 Deep Clean from Chemist Warehouse for a deep cleanse and up to 100% dandruff protection. Head & Shoulders Deep Clean is $11.99. Live, look, feel well at Chemist Warehouse.
At Coles, you can lower the cost of your Aussie barbecues with delicious 100% Aussie Coles beef quick-cook porterhouse steaks or Coles brand beef and thyme burgers. Any 2 packs for just $12. Coles, value the Australian way.
Rediscover why you fell in love with film.
What is your name?
Tatawali. Do you know about me?
I know who you are. Why are you here?
For an unconventional life.
What do you want?
What everyone wants.
I want them to hear what I have to say.
9:30 weeknights, True Life takes centre stage with a collection of biopics.
You have a story.
Ordinary lives turned extraordinary.
Would you believe a 15-year-old kid was working for the federal government? But he was.
The people who pushed boundaries.
The world can't stop us.
Hustled big.
If you think a princess can do what I did, you're incorrect.
Lost everything.
It's like I'm dead in here.
They stood up, spoke up, shocked and inspired change.
We want respect.
Stories so incredible, they'll stay with you forever.
You really get a kick out of yourself, don't you?
The Biopics collection starts with Cry Freedom, Monday 9:30 on SBS World Movies.
Well, Donald Trump may have lost the US presidential election, but with more than 70 million people who voted for him, there are, of course, many supporters who say their allegiance still lies with Mr Trump. And now that President Joe Biden has been officially sworn in, many Americans fear that divisions in their country are only set to deepen.
The inauguration here is marked by an upturned flag. So convinced is Eric Braden that Donald Trump somehow had the election stolen from him. Eric's been so angry, he's been leading his right-wing militia onto the streets.
Today we're coming here to the Capitol in Austin for many reasons. None of them good.
Here and there, and I gotta say this, and I gotta say that.
Back at his trailer home, he tells me he'll never accept Joe Biden as president, and that for him, the inauguration is a signal that his country is dying before his very eyes.
America is deeply in distress, and we are on the moment and the brink of complete division. And
which looks like what?
Division? What it looks like is states like Texas that actually have the legal right to leave the union will do that.
That's fanciful, but it is an indication of the strength of feeling there is. The assault on the US Capitol has illustrated to many Americans the extent to which the right is prepared to go to lodge its protest. It's continuing to do so at state capitals across the country. But the events of the last year have shown that the left in America is also prepared to disrupt and make its presence felt. Last summer, they were roused into action not by misinformation from a president, but the killing of George Floyd. Protest leader Jay Gutierrez fears he'll be arrested many more times fighting white supremacy in America, especially now, as he sees it, the right has been emboldened.
There's going to be, chaos in some way. There's going to be uprisings from their end. There's going to continue to be uprisings from our end of wanting to see change and wanting to see justice prevail. So I just think that you're going to see that intensify. I don't think in any way, shape, or form Biden winning, I don't see, there to be peace from this point.
Others on the left say the issues of inequality and poverty are ones that will keep them fighting too. Eric and his militia mate Tim wanted to show off their preparedness for the battles they're expecting.
Yeah, we got a problem.
It was a bit of a game, but one that ended up starting a fire that quickly spread. What the coming months bring
Hey, get that water hose!
may not be as comical or as easy to contain.
And to take a closer look at the day in US politics, I'm joined now by SBS reporter Prue Luan. Good evening, Prue. What do we know about the executive orders that President Biden signed today?
A very good evening to you, Jazz. Well, first off, we know that there were a lot of them. There were 17 executive orders, proclamations, memoranda. And this was really a case of presidential shock and awe. We haven't seen something like this before. Now, President Biden, have to get used to saying that, has changed the decor in the Oval Office. Paintings have been swapped out. For example, the populist painting of the populist president, Andrew Jackson. His portrait has gone out, but what has stayed is the resolute desk. And that's what President Biden today used when he signed those 17 executive moves. A lot of them were about immigration and the way America presents itself to the rest of the world. So, for example, dreamers. These are the kids of migrants who came to the United States without papers. What the president today has done is bolster protections for them. The previous president was inclined to send them back abroad. Now, one of President Trump's pet projects was, of course, construction of the wall. That stops. Also, what happens is the ending immediately of the travel ban on Muslim-majority nations. All of these send a message. Now, President Biden himself has said it might just be the beginning because things may go to court, for example, but the intention's there. And what's fascinating is, even as the rhetoric is about unity, what he's doing is unravelling the Trump legacy. And as we saw in that previous package, a lot of people supported him.
And Prue, Vice President Kamala Harris was also in the Senate today on this momentous day. What was behind that?
Janice, what an extraordinary day for her. Here she is being sworn in, the first female Vice President of the United States, and then she ducks into the Senate. Reason why is she was actually swearing in 3 new senators. One of those senators is the senator who replaces her. She was, of course, the junior senator in California, and the other 2 are the 2 gentlemen who recently won for the Democrats in Georgia. We've spoken a lot about the fact that the Democrats now have 50, the Republicans have 50, and with Kamala Harris, because she has a vote, it becomes 51. But perhaps we've glossed over the fact that for legislation to go through the Senate, you actually need 60 votes, unless you can connect it to the budget. So some Democrats want to end that process. Joe Biden probably doesn't want to. In other words, interesting times ahead for him to get his program through.
Indeed it will be. Thank you so much for your analysis. That's our reporter Prue Luan from the SBS newsroom. Well, 3 members of the US National Guard have been killed during a routine training flight in New York State. The medical evacuation helicopter crashed in a field outside a rural town south of Rochester. The state's governor, Andrew Cuomo, says flags will be flown at half-mast on state buildings in honour of the troops. The cause of the crash is under investigation. Returning to Australia, and a man in his early 30s was shot dead after crashing a stolen car into parked vehicles 100 kilometres east of Melbourne. He allegedly stole an Audi at knife point, confronting a sergeant and 3 senior constables refusing demands to put the weapon down. He was fatally shot twice at the scene. Police said the offender was considered dangerous.
To be confronted by an offender armed with a knife and have your car taken is really terrifying.
Homicide Squad detectives are interviewing the 4 officers involved in the shooting, and a report will be prepared for the coroner. SunSmart has launched a new campaign urging men to stop being complacent about skin protection. Their key message: if you cover something, it lasts longer. The campaign comes after a study revealed 41% of men don't use sun protection daily. SunSmart hope to remind people of the dangers of sun exposure, which kills twice as many men than women. Australia's women's tennis world number 1, Ash Barty, has apologised after being spotted in a Melbourne supermarket without a mask. The 24-year-old's manager describing her actions as an innocent priority. The 2019 French Open winner will return to the court in Adelaide next week, 11 months after her last professional match. Headlining an exhibition event alongside fellow high-ranking stars Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka. Her last appearance was in February's Qatar Open. Well, coming up, the weather details and a historic transformation at Victoria's oldest Hindu temple.
Whoa. Oh my lord.
That's a lot of money.
Has my whole life been a lie, basically?
The brand new season, Who Do You Think You Are UK, starts tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
This is Vienna's Gilded Age. There is something unsettling deep below the surface, a hidden darkness that the city is struggling to hide.
What's your field of study?
The psychopathy of the criminal mind.
Catchy. Woman shot through the heart at close range. Her door was locked. Key was on the inside.
You're saying we have an invisible weapon and a killer who can pass through walls.
There's more than one illusionist at work here.
Now this is a story all about how fast food got flipped, turned upside down. Took one huge bite of that foot-long bread and said, yo, skip
Skip the grease and eat fresh instead.
Are itch and dandruff holding you back? Try Head & Shoulders Ultramen 2-in-1 Deep Clean from Chemist Warehouse. The 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner formula is boosted with charcoal extract to provide an extra deep cleanse, removing sweat and styling residue. It also prevents dandruff, fights itch and nourishes scalp. Head & Shoulders Ultramen 2-in-1 Deep Clean is $11.99 at Chemist Warehouse. Also available in a signature Old Spice scent. Live, look, feel well at Chemist Warehouse.
The legendary Pope auto-wind hose reel has an industry-leading controlled rewind system. A stop-and-go action which is super smooth. Go, stop! It's got a 180-degree swivel mounting bracket, which all means no more messy backyards. And if that's not enough, the hose has a 10-year warranty.
Huh? But I'm only 6.
The Pope auto-wind hose reel. Smoother, safer, better.
Ferrari formal wear and bridal mega sale is on now. Get up to 70% off. Bridal gowns start from $199. Men's designer suits from only $99. Don't miss the mega sale. 1 week only. Visit ferrariformal.com.au.
Make more of the things you want possible with Cash Converters. Life made possible.
Your spare pair. Your new style of hair pair. The flying through the air pair. We could all use a second pair. At Specsavers, get 2 designer pairs, no gap, from the $199 single vision range when you're with selected health funds.
This January 26, we have an opportunity to come together.
United under the same sun for an open and honest discussion.
To shine a light on our shared history.
Because it always was and always will be.
Your country. My country.
Our country.
Join us for a special network event, the Sunrise Ceremony, live Tuesday 6 a.m. on NITV and SBS.
There's your wow factor right there. Oh! Unbelievable!
Perth Wildcats versus the South East Melbourne Phoenix, Sunday at 5 on SBS Iceland and on demand.
There's a world of stories available for free at SBS On Demand. Download the app or visit the website today. SBS On Demand, a world of difference.
To the weather now, and anticipated extreme heatwave conditions forecast for this weekend have prompted fire warnings for parts of New South Wales. The Bureau of Meteorology says a high pressure system over the Tasman Sea will distribute extreme heat throughout the state. Temperatures of up to 42 degrees are expected in Western Sydney. That's 10 degrees above the January average. Above average temperatures are also forecast for the state's south coast.
You've got some days ahead of it, so take your actions now. Prepare your property, prepare around your property, and know what you'll do if fire threatens. So for farmers, we'd ask check your machinery, know what you're going to do on the day.
The Bureau is also asking that people check in on loved ones, especially elderly friends, relatives and neighbours. To the forecast, in a band of mid to high level cloud stretches from the Pilbara region to the southeast coast of Western Australia with embedded thunderstorms. Another trough extending through inland Queensland and northern New South Wales is generating convective cloud in the region. In the major centres, sunny skies for Perth and Adelaide, a possible storm ahead for Darwin, possible showers for Sydney and Hobart. It'll be cloudy in the rest of the capitals. Further afield, thunder ahead for Tahiti and Nadi, a fine one for Christchurch, a few showers ahead for Auckland. To Southeast Asia now, thunderstorms on the way for Singapore and Port Moresby, overcast skies in Jakarta, thunder on the way for Kuala Lumpur, cloud clearing in Phnom Penh, grey skies for Honiara. Further north, cold but clear in Beijing, a cloudy day for Hanoi and Hong Kong, rainy in Seoul, thunder in Manila. Heading west, a fine day ahead for Beirut and Jerusalem. Foggy in Delhi, some rain to soak Islamabad, grey skies in Mumbai, but a fine day ahead for Tehran. To Europe now, snowing in Moscow, rainy for Madrid and Stockholm, cloud over Paris and Berlin, and some thunder to roll through Rome. To Africa, a few showers on the way for Casablanca and Algiers, partly cloudy skies in Johannesburg and Nairobi. It'll be clear in Cairo. To South America, rain on the way for Rio, fine and sunny in Santiago and Buenos Aires, cloud over Bogotá, thunder in Asunción, and overcast skies in Panama City. To North America now, fine and sunny for New York and Los Angeles, a warm day ahead for Mexico City and Havana, all clear for Chicago, and drizzle for Vancouver, snowfall in Toronto. Victoria's oldest Hindu temple has undergone a historic transformation as it prepares to unveil what it's calling the largest granite Hindu shrine honouring deity Ganesha in the Southern Hemisphere. Despite disruptions due to COVID-19, the project, which uses artists and architects in both India and Australia, will be consecrated this weekend.
A 5,000-year-old mantra recited in Sanskrit, worshipping the Hindu deities. Devotees pray day and night for 7 days over waters from the holy rivers of India, holding the divinity of the gods. The waters will then be poured over the statues inside the new shrines, completing a process 2 years in the making.
To me, it's the grace of God. I seriously and sincerely believe that there were so many obstacles.
The shrine is made of 17 layers of granite, a stone believed to possess the 5 elements of nature. 200 artisans in India hand-carved the pieces to millimetre accuracy. The Melbourne-based architect spent a year overseeing the work before hastily moving it to Australia due to the COVID outbreak.
I don't want stuck in India. So I brought some of the incompleted works down here, and we brought some specialist sculptors. Then we completed here.
Rising through the ceiling, the shrine is capped off with a 6-ton dome and brass spire to channel energy.
Really, really beautiful, and they just made it's an amazing job they've done.
I think everyone loves the material that it's built out of.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
The $4 million redesign, completely funded by devotees of one of the fastest growing religions in Australia. The temple's seeing a 10-fold increase in daily worshippers since it opened.
At that time, maybe there was about 150. This is back in '92. Today, 1,500.
For 4 days, devotees are invited to enter the shrines and rub oil upon the statues, something that's not allowed outside of a consecration ceremony, many describing it as a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Mainly in India you see those types of things, but being there when they're opening it, being there when they're building it, is something that I think I'm never going to have the opportunity again.
I think we're going to get more people than ever.
The granite shrine is designed to stand for 1,000 years, providing a pilgrimage destination for many generations to come.
Especially now that we are the largest granite shrines in the Southern Hemisphere, everyone has heard about it, everyone wants to come and see it, so that's going to happen.
Abby Dinham, SBS World News.
Recapping our top stories now, US President Joe Biden has begun his White House administration with a number of executive orders to undo some of Donald Trump's key policies. In a sharp break with tradition, Donald Trump snubbed the inauguration. Australia's leaders have congratulated President Biden and Vice President Harris on their inauguration, but there are warnings the government will need to do more on climate change. And the Prime Minister has slammed Cricket Australia over its decision to drop any reference to Australia Day. Scott Morrison suggesting Cricket Australia focus on cricket rather than politics. Cricket Australia is standing by its decision after consultation with Indigenous advisors. That is the world this Thursday. If you missed some of tonight's bulletin, you can always catch up on the SBS News website shortly. And a reminder, you can also watch the bulletin live there or on our app. Lynn Evelyn will be back with our next bulletin at 10:45 tonight. Thanks for your company. From the team, good night.
SBS World.